Welcome to the Effortless Swimming Podcast. My guest today is Karsten Weber, and Karsten and I started working together in the last 1 to 2 months. And the reason I want to get you on, Karsten, is because you've had a pretty significant improvement in your swimming in the last 2 months. So I want to talk about that, and then also sort of what got you into swimming, because you weren't. I think it was a few months ago that you said you could only do 25 meters in about a minute. And
right.
It's improved pretty significantly since then. So I think it's good to share what you've done, because I know a lot of other people are probably in the same boat. So first of all, welcome. And what's your sort of background into getting into swimming?
Sure. So I've always enjoyed, swimming in terms of, did a lot of diving when I was a teenager. Grew up in Denmark, now live here in Austin, Texas. But back in Denmark, it was always breaststroke and it was diving, so I never did any freestyle. And then for the last 10 years or so, I did very little swimming at all. But now I'm signed up for an Ironman in September of this year, and that includes swimming. So I've been out there, started swimming back in September, and September of this year is when the Ironman is. So. That has been great. In terms of what got me into the Ironman, that's an interesting story where on Father's Day of 2019, I was down at the coast here in Texas and trying to learn to kite surf, and was out there a couple of hours. And then when I came in, I just started feeling really crappy. It's like a lot of pressure on my chest. I was wondering if I pulled a muscle or if I had somehow swallowed some seawater or something. And it turned out it was a heart attack. I never in a million years would have guessed that it was a heart attack. My wife came back to the beach. She'd been out for lunch. She just got back and put the kite down. I sat down. I told her I just don't feel right. And it got worse and worse minute by minute. And she's like, I'm taking you to the ER. And I'm like, okay. And we're driving from the beach. She said she'd just seen one of those little, emergency rooms, a little local one. So she's driving from the beach. She's trying to make a decision. Should she go to the big heart hospital that's about half an hour away? Or should she go to this little local doc in a box that's 2 minutes away? And I'm glad she made the decision to go to the doc in the box, or I wouldn't be here today. I mean, it was, by the time I got to the ER, that little emergency room, I could just barely crawl in there. And there was a nurse there that immediately recognized that it was a heart attack and just started the treatment. And a couple of hours later, I was transferred to the big heart hospital, and I got a stent put in. Earlier that same year, I'd done 2 ultra marathons, so I'd done a lot of running. I was in great shape. And the surgeon there said if I hadn't done all that running, if I weren't in that kind of a shape, I just wouldn't have made it. The kind of heart attack I had was in the Widowmaker, and there's a 2% survival rate for what I had. So I'm lucky to be alive, and did 6 months of recovery, did a full recovery, and my cardiologist said no restriction on exercise. In fact, the more the better. And I'm thinking, the more the better? Okay, let's go for an Ironman. What could be better than that? So that's the motivation. That's why I'm here, and that's why, want to prolong my life, want to, have more years with my family. So that's what started this. So.
And so then you decide to enter an Ironman. And what was your swimming background before this? Because had you had any experience swimming at school or anything like that?
Mainly just diving and just, but not a whole lot of swimming. And back in Denmark, it was all breaststroke. I mean, that was so popular, so that was what I stuck with. And I basically never did any freestyle. So back here in September of last year when I started training for the Ironman. That was really the first time in decades that I did freestyle. And I remember when I joined effortless swimming, you asked me what do you want to focus on, and I said, well, since I haven't really done it in forever, I want to focus on not getting any bad habits. Right? I mean, starting from scratch. It literally did take me a minute to get from one end of the pool to the other, 25 meters. And I was so winded when I got to the other side. I was kicking with my feet like crazy, thinking that's where all the propulsion comes from. I've since learned that is not the case. And but that's really how it started out. And I really like the idea of being able to do the video recording and going in on a very detailed level and adjusting things. That really appealed to me.
And what did you think when you first got in and started swimming, where you struggled to make 25 meters? Was it like, oh boy, like what have I got ahead of me? Or was it something where you thought, okay, this is just a starting point and I know I can get better?
I was so comfortable with breaststroke that I thought about, I'm just going to do the Ironman with breaststroke instead of freestyle. And then I started looking at the times, and it's like, no, I gotta learn this. I gotta learn this freestyle. And then just very. I'm an engineer by background, so just taking a very engineering approach. And I remember getting the snorkel on there, so I didn't have to turn my head. Got the pool buoy, so I didn't have to worry about the sagging legs, which were really bad. Instead of being horizontal, I think I was more like 30 degrees or something when I was going through the water. But really to where just try and focus on one thing at a time, break it down that way. And I remember when it first started out, it was, I was at, I think, 26 strokes or so to get from one end of the pool to the other. I just counted the total strokes instead of doing the distance per stroke, and it was about something like 26, and I could get that down to 22 strokes to get from one side to the other pretty quickly, and then it felt like it plateaued there until I started getting some of that feedback from the effortless swimming, and then really getting the right body position and some more of the technique. And now, last week I just counted it, and it's somewhere around 14 to 15 strokes per lane. So it's come from 26 to 15.
And I remember at the start, one of the things I suggested was to do some sort of time trial. So said, all right, 400 time trial, just to give you a bit of a benchmark of where you're at, so we know if you're improving or not. And I think you did a 7:50. I think it was 7 minutes 50.
Right, that sounds about right. Yeah.
400, and then.
And that was again. I mean, that was what 2 months after starting swimming, so that has improved quite a bit there. But it was still, I mean, in hindsight, even that was still, with sinking legs. And then something happened to where I just always assumed that the sinking legs would only go away if you sort of made up for it with the arms and you were swimming so fast that they just naturally the leg starts to rise. I don't know, that was my thinking, or it was when I was kicking with the legs were just not very effective. I was kicking a lot, but it was only giving propulsion like backwards. There's no upwards lift. So changing it to where the kick helped lift the legs and also just move the hip enough to really sort of lift up the butt. I mean, that made a huge difference. And I think the last one was just over 7 minutes for the last time trial.
Yeah, I think you said it was 7:07, and after that 7:50, you said, all right, next goal might be set under 7:45, and then you jumped under that pretty quickly, which is
right.
Awesome. And one of the things you mentioned about that you changed about your kick was you made it feel like you were flicking a piece of dirt off your shoe as a for the downward kick, which I think is a really good analogy for kicking, because we want this downwards whipping motion, and that downwards whipping motion can help bring the hips and the legs up. So it's a good way to think about it. And I was looking back at your original videos as well, and one of the things that we looked at with it was somewhat short out the front, so there wasn't much length and extension. And the stroke now, where you're reaching for the wall, so to speak, it's so much longer, and you get much better connection through the whole body with it, and that as well can help bring the legs up too. And that's what we're seeing now, I think. So how does it feel, your stroke, and when you're swimming, how does it feel now compared to about a month ago, or maybe just before you started with this? It
feels a lot better. I still feel like I was, for a long time, I was very much focusing on this distance per stroke, where I was like gliding and effectively doing very slow strokes. And that results in just always being out of breath, because it takes a while for, I'm trying to breathe on both sides for symmetry. And if you just go too slow, there's a long time between breathing. And so now I'm trying to really just speed it up a little bit and do the cadence a little higher. And that has actually helped tremendously in terms of not running out of breath. So swimming faster made it easier in that sense.
Yeah, and that's an interesting one too, because I think like stroke count's a good measure sometimes of your technique. If you're just swimming like a very easy 50 or a very easy 100, you can get your stroke count, and it's an indication as to how efficient you can be in the swim. But it doesn't mean that we always just want to sit at the lowest possible stroke count, because as you said, sometimes it's a long time in between breaths. And the other factor in your speed is your cadence as well. And we actually find that, like for me, for example, if I try and hold my minimum stroke count, my effort or my heart rate's up quite high sometimes, because there's quite a bit of power going into the stroke. I'm not getting as much breath, and I can actually swim at, let's say instead of 26 strokes, if I swim at 32 strokes for a 50, and I hold a stroke rate that's probably 10 to 20% quicker, I'm a lot faster, and the effort's a lot less, because it's like that sweet spot. It's like gears on a bike. You don't want to be sitting in that big gear the whole time. You want to go maybe one below, where you can just keep it ticking over all day, especially if you're doing an Ironman. So it's about finding that balance, and it sounds like you're starting to find that balance with your stroke.
Right, and it was surprising that going that a little bit faster just made it so much easier in terms of the breathing and the pattern. As you said, the sweet spot. I've done some outdoor swimming. It's winter time here, so it's with a wetsuit. That helps tremendously in just terms of my sinking legs. And so I have done some Ironman distance swimming. The last one was in about an hour and 18 minutes, which is respectable. So it's not like I'm not in it to try and set any age group record. I'm just in it to try and finish it and have fun with it. But that is a pretty decent time, I feel, and I still think there's a lot of room for improvement. Certainly, we looked at something where the arms are not bent enough still. There's still a lot of areas but the big surprise to me is just how much of this is technique and not raw power. Like if you're running or biking, you can always power a little more. Here, it's just there's so much technique.
Yeah, that's it. And it's and sometimes if you're brand new to a sport and new to anything, like you don't know what you don't know. So, and it's really common with the kick. You said at the start you're just kicking so hard because you felt like that's where the propulsion should come from. And that's what I think a lot of people, they have the thought of when they first get started. But as you start to sort of work these things out and put them all together, swimming can be really enjoyable. It can be a lot of fun. And it can be, in a way, somewhat effortless. And when you get into that rhythm and that zone, it's really enjoyable. And that's often where you improve a lot more because you're having fun with it, as you said. And I think that that approach where you're not overly stressed about the times that you're doing. You're just there for the process and just seeing what you can get down to. I think it's a really good mindset for it as well. And to have that 118 as just another benchmark is a great way to then, all right, we'll see what we can get down to come September, because it's 9 months is a lot of time to bring that down. And if you were to get under 110, that would be really impressive.
Right. No, that would certainly exceed my expectations. So that would be a great goal. So.
Yeah, and I think that's certainly possible. Just looking at looking at your videos every couple of weeks, that's the way I think it's heading.
Mm-hmm. No, that would be great. So certainly looking forward to that. I will say one thing that really helped me was what I talked about earlier, was really breaking it down and just try and get use the snorkel and use the pull buoy. I mean, just do all these things in order to focus on one thing at a time. And I remember I was so proud when I did that first 100-meter swim in 2 minutes with my snorkel, and I sent that in as my first video, and you're like, that looks good, now try it without the snorkel. That was the first feedback. But it's still, I mean, that helped me a lot. Break it down, focus on one thing at a time. It's hard to change everything at once.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think at the start I might have said, like, we'll keep it, the stuff that we focus on at the start might seem really simple. And often we don't work on the catch at the very start. And sometimes that's kind of the sexy thing to work on, is the catch and the pull, because that's where a lot of the propulsion comes from. But if we don't have these other things in place, like alignment and reach and rotation, then it's very hard to work on that. So I think it probably helps that you have this engineering approach to it. It's just step by step, just like, okay, I might be talking a language, which is helpful.
So, no, definitely. And just break it down, count the number of strokes. If you suddenly are spending 1 or 2 strokes less to get from one side and the other, you're probably doing something right. So. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for sharing the last couple of months on the podcast. Is there anything else that you think would be helpful for someone listening, or something that you've maybe found in the last few months that we haven't talked about yet?
I would just say I like the videos. I particularly like the Feedback Friday. It's great to see somebody who's not an expert, and after a while you can start to pick up and say, oh, I see another problem as well. So I think that those are very useful, instead of only seeing the elite swimmers. And other than that, keep up the good work, and I look forward to the Ironman and hopefully reporting back a good time.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well. So thanks again, Karsten. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good one.